Good morning. Welcome to Life at the Lake. I'm Wes Eastham. I live here at Sam Rayburn Lake in beautiful southeast Texas. And this is my first episode on YouTube. And today I'm going to try to demonstrate how to change the armature on a Minn Kota Powerdrive trolling motor. Stick with us. Before we get started, I'd like to just share some things. I'm a born-again Christian, have been for 36 years now, and tried living life my own way. Didn't work out so good for me, but thanks be to the Lord Jesus Christ, I found a new way to live, one rooted in the truth of the Bible, and my life has been better ever since. So if you're struggling in life, open up a Bible, read the book of John. It'll teach you and show you exactly where you need to go to straighten your life out. Just wanted to give you that tidbit before we get started. So here's the box that I received from Johnson Outdoors for the trolling motor that we're gonna work on. This is it here. If I can get it in focus, Minn Kota Powerdrive. We're going to just be replacing that shaft. You ask, why are we replacing it? Because it's bent. Ran into the dock. Broke the propeller and bent the shaft. So we'll be doing that today. So the first thing you have to do is remove this prop. To do that, you're going to need a 1/2-inch socket, ratchet. Just hold the prop. Comes off pretty easy. There's not a lot of pressure on it. It's not real tight. It is a nylon nut, or has a nylon sleeve in it to keep it from backing off. So you want to be careful when you remove that. Put it in a place where it's not going to get lost. And then just pull your prop off. There's a washer inside of here. You don't want to lose it. So catch it as you pull and spin the camera around. So when I pulled my impeller off, I noticed that my seal was already sticking out of its housing, which means I've got water up in the stator of the trolling motor, most likely, unless the other seals held it. But that's what happens when you try to run one with a bent shaft. You can dislodge the seals, get water up into the electrical winding part of the motor, and it'll ruin it in a period of time. So yeah, we got to get this replaced. So the next thing you got to do is remove this shear pin that's in the shaft. That's something that you don't want to lose. So I'm going to grab something real quick. I'll be right back. So these are handy. They're little parts. Trays. This one has a magnetized base, so if you're working on your car or lawnmower, you can just drop it on anything that's steel and it'll hold it in place. This is an aluminum boat, so it's not going to work as well, but I can still put my parts in there to keep them from getting knocked off. So I'm going to pull this seal off. So the housing to the outer seal is what's really damaged. Not necessarily the seal itself, it's dislodged. Just this little, looks like stainless steel housing came off of it. Next thing we're going to do is remove this outer cover plate. To do that, you want to apply a marking of some kind at the separation line here, so that when you put it back together, you put it back in the same place as it came out. And this is real important because when you learn about tuning a trolling motor, you want to make sure you have it aligned exactly where you were before. So I'm going to grab some tape, make me a mark here so that when I separate it, I know right where to go back with it. So I've got my masking tape, and I have a Sharpie marker. I'll just take me a little piece of tape. put it where I'm going to divide the halves on the trolling motor and make me 2 marks, one right beside the other. 2 always seem to be a lot easier to match up than just 1. Then I'm going to take a razor blade and I'm going to cut it right there at that split line so that when I take this off, it'll come apart easier. Okay, next you're going to need a 5/16 inch socket to go on your ratchet, and you'll just break these two bolts that are holding the outer head to the body. Again, they're not real tight. The thing we're going to watch for, and hopefully we don't have, is water up inside the armature, up inside the housing where the electrical windings are, because that could be a problem. These are long bolts that go from the outer all the way to this back shaft to hold the whole assembly together. You can see how long they are. And I'm looking, there's an O-ring right here on this outer head of this long bolt. So I want to make sure we leave that in place so when we know we go back together that there's an O-ring that needs to go right there. Just pull that out and do the same thing to the other side. So we've got the outer cover plate off. There's our 2 markings on our tape that'll align when we go back in. Bearings, seals are still intact. There was no water, no moisture that came out of the trolling motor, so that's great news. Got 2 new seals to go inside of there when we put it back together. Now the next thing is to get this armature out, and from what I've read and looked at, it can be pretty tight, so we're going to try to pull it out next. And it popped right out with the housing. You got your outer bearing out here, which is nice and smooth. Hopefully the new one I ordered has this bearing on it. If not, we're going to have to pull this bearing and put it on the new shaft. Be right back. Now that the armature is out, if you'll notice, there's this washer was in the front nearest the shaft to the prop. Then this one was next. And then we have a keeper pin, a locking pin that's locked to the shaft here. So we're going to take it out and put it aside. Might check the new one to see if it has one on it, but I bet it doesn't. So just to verify, I got the new shaft out, the new armature, which is this one. This is the old one. And you'll notice that the pin, the locking pin or locking ring is still on the shaft on the new one, so I don't have to replace that, and also have a new bearing. And just notice the difference in discoloration. This motor's less than 6 months old and already got quite a bit of discoloration on the where the bushings touch the armature. All right, see you in a minute. All right, so just to go over some of the gaskets that come with your repair kit, you notice this white gasket right here. You get a new one of those with your repair kit, so we'll pull that out. And always like to leave it in a conspicuous spot so that I don't forget to put the new one back in before I reinstall. Also, there is an O-ring on the back side of the cover, which you get a new O-ring in the repair kit package to replace it with. And you also get the 2 washers that go on your long bolts that put the assembly back together, plus the 2 new seals. So we'll start putting those together next. So whenever you're putting gaskets back on really anything, you always want to lubricate them with something. And I just like to use plain old tried and true Vaseline. Just take a little bit on your finger, rub it on the gasket, and then just spread it evenly around the gasket. It does two things. It helps to seal, and it helps to hold your gasket in place while you're working the other parts. It won't shift around on you like if it's just in there dry. So always remember, lubricate your gasket before you put it back on. All right, we've reinserted the armature inside the stator and put that back into the housing, making sure that we had the bushings properly seated on their rotating element and that the rear bearing was in the back of the housing. This is pretty tricky. The way I had to do it, I had to put the armature in first, hold against it while I slid the housing over the top of it, because it's magnetic and it'll want to pull the armature back out if you don't hold against it real tight. But I believe we got it pretty good. It's seated real well, and we'll continue with assembly. All right, so next we've got to remove these seals out of the outer housing, and they only go in one way. They only go in from the outside. You've got a brass seat back here that goes against your washers on the shaft, which seats this and holds everything in place, holds your stator or armature in place. So we're going to try to pull these bearings out, see how difficult they are. We'll start with make note that the direction that this bearing is facing with this groove to the outside when you're taking it apart, so that you can put it right back together the same way. Just going to use a screwdriver, kind of hook it in there and pry it right out, just like that. And then you have an inner bearing, inner seal, not bearing, but seal. It's on the inside. It also has to come out. There is a spacer, looks like, in between them. It's a cardboard spacer. I'm sure that needs to go back when you're putting the new seals in. And that one rolled out relatively easy. They're just lip seals is all they are. So nothing complicated about that. All right, we're going to clean this out real well and then reinsert the new seals. Be right back. Okay, another little tip. When you're putting these seals back in, you always want to put a little grease around that outer rim of the seal for two reasons. One, it makes it easier to slide in, and two, it will help to seal any water from getting through the outside of the seal versus the shaft seal on the inside. To push this in, you need a 5/8 inch socket that fits on the outer rim of the seal. You don't want to push on the inner rim, you want to push on the outer rim, and seat it all the way to the bottom, and then do the same thing for the other seal. All right, we have our two new seals installed. One of the seals has a metal ring on the outside, which faces to the outside, so you know that's the one that needs to be farthest out in the housing, and then the other one is behind it. It's a double seal. They're just lip seals. They just contact the shaft and keep water from coming inside the motor. I've also greased and lubricated the gasket that goes on the back side of the housing, and time to put it back together. So if you'll remember previously, we had put our tape to indicate where our housing needed to go. I made a mistake. I should have put markings on the back as well, so that I match that up. So we're gonna see, we'll tune this once we get it together and make sure that we're at the optimum speed for the trolling motor after we get it reassembled. So all we're gonna do now is put this housing on, put the bolts back in it with the 2 new O-rings on the outside, so that seals up and doesn't allow water to get inside the assembly as well. All right, so we have one of the long bolts in. We've got the next one with the new O-ring on it, and we'll insert it into the housing, line it up, get it started, and then pull these up to snug so that we can start adjusting the timing on the motor. Be right back. All right, we're reassembled. Got the bolts fairly snug just to make sure that everything lines up properly. And put your key in, turn your shaft, make sure you don't hear anything rubbing or metal to metal sounds that you shouldn't hear. This one's really smooth, got a good magnetic pull on it. So I think we're ready to do a little tuning. To do that, you just loosen the 2 hold down bolts, and you start your motor and you run it up in speed, and you just turn this housing clockwise, counterclockwise until you hear the optimum run speed, which you'll hear the shaft speed up, slow down, and you want to set it at the optimum highest speed at the highest setting. So we'll try that next. All right, so we're going to attempt to show you how to tune a trolling motor while I hold the camera in one hand and rotate the housing in the other. But you just start your motor up. You can hear the speed of it, and as you turn it, you'll hear it slow down. That to me is the optimum speed right there. So you just shut your motor off and lock those bolts down right there, and you should be good to go. One other thing before we go, if you'll notice, there's a slot in the shaft to insert your screwdriver while you're tightening this nylon nut, because it'll want to spin the shaft while you're tightening it. So just use the screwdriver to hold back up on your armature while you tighten your nut. Snug it up. I'm sure the recommendations from the manufacturer are inch pounds or very low foot pounds on tightening that, but I just pull it up till it's snug, and there you go. We've put new seals, new armature into the trolling motor, got it all put back together, and guess what? We're ready to go fishing.